Hello guys and welcome back to Planet 40k Tyranids, and today we're going to be talking about the Tyrannofex, giving it a little brief review, a bite-sized review, go through some of the good tactics that you can use with the Tyrannofex. Then at the end of the video we're going to give it a Planet 40k rating out of 5. Also guys, do me a huge favour and please subscribe to the channel. We are a new channel, so thanks all you guys that have already subscribed. But yeah, other than that, let's get on with the video. Okay, so the Tyrannofex is currently £36 in the UK or $60 in the US. Now, on the Warhammer community page just the other day, they've actually announced that prices are going to go up from March by 6%. So expect those prices to increase slightly, but yeah, at present £36 or $60. And you're also getting them in the same kit as the Tervigon model. So if you were to purchase this box, you can either use it as a Tervigon or a Tyrannofex. Now, keywords of note for the Tyrannofex, well, it's of course a monster. That's the main keyword here. And you're going to be selecting this from one of your heavy support options. So that's the keywords. Let's get on to the actual datasheet. Okay, so the Tyrannofex, the datasheet, well, it's 185 points. Now, there are some upgrade options. We'll go through that later in the video. But 185 points, and this is what it gets you. So 9-inch movement, weapon skill and ballistic skill 3+, strength 7, toughness 8, wounds 17, attacks 4, leadership 7, and a 2+ armor save. Now, this is a degradable stat line, so when he is damaged, when it goes between 5 and 8 wounds, or 8 wounds or less rather, your movement, the weapon skill and ballistic skill are all going to get affected. So your movement goes down to 8, so you only lose 1 inch there. The ballistic skill and the weapon skill also drops to a 4+. Now when you go down to only 4 wounds remaining, the movement will drop to only 6 inches, and then weapon skill and ballistic skill will be a 5+. So it's not really where you want to be. You definitely want to be at your top bracket, especially when firing with this heavy weapon. So the Tyrannofex is equipped with a flesh borer hive as standard. It's got the stinger salvos and the powerful limbs. So there will be some upgrades as mentioned. We're going to go through all the options now. So first of all, it's the flesh borer hive. 24-inch range, so not the best range, but not too bad. Assault 30, so you're getting a ton of shots with that. Strength 5, so you're wounding Space Marines on a 3+, which is pretty good. -1 AP, okay, not too bad. And only 1 damage, okay, what can you expect when you've got 30 shots, right? So this is pretty good against light infantry. 1 wound models in particular, they're going to be really effective against those kind of models. Orc boys, for example, you're going to drop them down with that -1 AP. And yeah, 1 damage is all you need against them kind of models. Now going up against Space Marines, as mentioned, yes, you do wound them on a 3+, but it's only -1 AP, so you're only dropping them to a 4+ armor save, and only 1 damage means you need 2 to go through just to kill a Space Marine troop. So there are probably better targets, but they're still going to be effective because of the sheer amount of shots you've actually got. So you can actually replace the flesh borer hive with the following. So the first one is the acid spray. Now quite a lot of people like this one. It's a 20-point upgrade. It's only 18-inch range, but it's still pretty good. So it's heavy D6 +6. So you're averaging what, 9 to 10 shots with that. It's strength 6, -3 AP, and the damage is 2. And it's an automatically hitting weapon because it's effectively like a flamer, isn't it? So with your 10 automatic hitting shots against toughness 3, you're going to be wounded on the 2+. And against Space Marines, again, I'm going to use Space Marines because they're quite an easy example to use. You're wounding them on a 3+ because they're only toughness 4. Even the toughness 5 models, in fact, you're wounding them on the 3+ too. But -3 AP is where it's really at here, because -3 AP takes a Space Marine model to a 6+ armor save, and each one is 2 damage, so you're removing models every time one of these goes through. Now going back a little bit, going against toughness 3 models, the damage is slightly wasted because they're likely going to have only 1 wound. But it means it's more of a flexible weapon. It's very versatile going up against, say, Space Marines, going up against Orc Boys, going up against Gaunts in a mirror match. Yeah, it can kind of do everything, and automatically hitting, of course, is really nice, right? Now, if that didn't tickle your fancy, then the other alternative is the Rupture Cannon. This is the big weapon, and this is another 20-point option. So this is a 48-inch range, so now you can be putting the Tyrannofex at the back of the board, and you've got almost the entire board there, and if you're playing... Is it long ways or width ways? Whatever way you're playing, the shorter side of it, you should be getting range of virtually every model in that 48 inches. Now it's heavy 3, so only 3 shots there, but it is strength 14. So very likely you're going to be wounding on a 2+. Only against toughness 8 you'll be wounding on a 3+. Now the AP is -4, so even Terminator models, well, they'll go on an in-1 save, so that's not the best example, but even 2+ armor save models will go to a 6+ armor save. And anything more than that, yeah, they're not going to have an armor save whatsoever. Now, as for the damage, this is where it gets interesting. It's D6 +4 damage. So on average, you're going to be getting between 7 and 8 damage every time one of these shots goes through. Now, okay, there is only 3 shots, but one of them goes through 7 or 8 damage, that's going to be nasty. Now, I recently used my Necrons against some Tyranids, against a Tyrannofex in fact, and this thing absolutely annihilated my Canoptic Spiders, 6 wound models that I was using reanimation protocols on, and yeah, they just took the whole lot of them out, and it was not a fun day for Necrons. So that weapon I really do think is pretty good. Now, yeah, okay, it's only 3 shots, it's a little bit swingy, but if you can get them to go off, then yeah, happy days. Now he's also got the Stinger Salvos, which is 24 inch range, Assault 8, Strength 5, -1 AP, 1 damage. So it has a very similar stat line as the Flesh Borer Hive, except it's only 8 shots rather than 30. Again, it's more of an anti-light infantry weapon. Right, so that's the weapon upgrades. There are some other Wargear upgrades that you can take. First of all is the Adrenal Glands. This is a 10-point upgrade. You get a +1 to your movement and a +1 to your strength. Now the movement is okay, I guess. Do you need to move it? Potentially yes if you've got the acid spray, but mainly it's about the strength here. The strength goes from strength 7 to strength 8. Now it's not all about the strength either really, because you've only got 4 attacks. This isn't really a melee monster, it's more of a shooting monster. But strength 8 going up against toughness 4 models, you're now wounding on a 2+. So it could be beneficial. And the second option is the Toxin Sacs. Now this is a 5-point upgrade, so there's half the price there. And this basically gives you any unmodified hit rolls of a 6 automatically wound. That's only in melee. Again, you've only got 4 attacks there. Are you going to get a 6? You might get 1. So this one isn't that useful unless you're using the Adrenal Surge stratagem, which we'll go over in the stratagem section of this video. Right, so that is all the Wargear covered. The only other thing to cover is the ability, which is Death Throes. When the model is destroyed, roll a d6 on a 6+. Enemy units within 6 inches suffer d6 mortal wounds. So just make sure this thing isn't near all your bugs when it goes boom, because yeah, that's not a good day. Okay, so let's talk about some adaptive physiologies that this Tyrannofex can actually take. Now I want to mention 3 here today. The first one is the Dermic Symbiosis for that 4+ invulnerable save. You've definitely got to have one of those on your monsters, right? Now that's going to cost you 25 points, so if you've got the extra points, definitely go for that one. The second option is the Synaptic Enhancement, which will give this model Shadow of the Warp and the Synapse abilities, and of course with the Synapse keyword. So if there aren't any Synapse creatures in the backfield, these are going to be giving all your models an automatic pass for your morale test, which you may need at the backfield. So that's going to cost you 15 points. The final one is the Voracious Ammunition. So after you've done your shooting attack, any unit that was actually hit by your ranged attacks, you roll a d6, and on a 2+, that unit suffers d3 mortal wounds. Now this is only going to be on one of those selected units. You can't be doing it on every single unit that you've actually fired at. It's kind of like a smite attack, but it's only on a 2+. Okay, so let's talk about some of those stratagems that are available to a Tyrannofex. First one I want to mention is the Scorched Bugs. Now because it's got the monster keyword, it's going to cost you 2 command points, not 1. But what it does is first of all it adds 6 inches to your range capabilities. So the Flesh Borer Hives, for example, that were only 24 inch range are now going to be 30 inch range, which is a lot more usable, isn't it? You're also going to be adding 1 to the strength of that weapon. So now this weapon is strength 6, which is going to be really good because, again, if you're going up against toughness 3, you're now wounding on 2s. All for 2 CP. Going up against a large unit with 30 shots at them, yeah, that's going to do some damage. Another one worth mentioning is Rapid Regeneration for 1 command point. And you could just bring back D3 lost wounds. Now this one could be situational, but it all depends on if you've been bracketed. D3 lost wounds could literally get you into a better bracket, which means you're hitting on a 3+, not a 4+, or even a 5+. Or also gives you that little bit extra movement, which maybe gets you onto an objective if needed as well. Situational, but keep it up your sleeve. Another one, Pathogenic Slime. If you took the Toxin Sacs Wargear, then it's only going to cost you a command point. Otherwise, it will cost you 2 command points. And when you're shooting, unmodified hit rolls of a 6 automatically wound the target. Now again, I'm going to use the example of the Flesh Borer Hives. You've got 30 shocks. You've got 30 shocks? You've got 30 shots. So on average, 5 of those will be 6s. Now, is it worth 2 command points if you're not with the Toxin Sacs? Probably not, to be honest with you. But again, you've got it up your sleeve. And the final one worth mentioning here is the Indomitable Monstrosity for 1 command point. Used on a monster that is a target of an attack from your opponent, and effectively it's like the marine version of transhuman physiology but on your monsters. A room roll of a 1, 2 or 3 will always fail irrespective of any of the abilities that the weapons have that your opponent uses. So they must wound your model on a 4+. Doesn't matter what strength it is, doesn't matter what it is at all. Now we are already toughness 8, so there's only really going to be strength 16 weapons that are going to do that damage. So again, very situational, it's not likely going to come up. There are also strength 9, strength 10, all the way up to strength 15 in fact, where they still wound you on a 3+. So yeah, it could still come in handy, especially if the damage is high, right? Okay, that's the stratagems. Let's move on to some Hive Fleets that I would like to use if I was taking a Tyrannofex. Now the first one I want to mention is the Youngmunder Hive Fleet. Gives you dense cover from 18 inches away, especially useful if you're using the Ruptor Cannon from 48 inches away. So giving you dense cover on a monster, not too bad. Now you could throw away the adaptive part of the Hive Fleet and give it one of the Hunt Biomorphologies, which was heightened reflexes, which will allow him to fall back and still shoot. Now of course you're a monster, you can actually shoot into combat, but maybe you've been tied down by a unit that you don't really want to be firing that weapon into. Maybe it's some Canoptic Scarab Swarms, for example. You don't want to be using a Rupture Cannon on some Scarabs. You want to be firing at the big and better stuff in the game. So yeah, being able to fall back and still fire somewhere else is pretty useful. Or you can use one of the Lurk Biomorphologies with Territorial Instincts, which gives him objective secured, and he'll also count as 5 models. Very useful, and especially when you've got primaries and also secondaries within the game of 40k. Another option here for the Hive Fleet is the Kronos Hive Fleet, being able to add 4-inch range to your ranged weapons. Again, going with the Flesh Borer Hive, which is only 24-inch range, getting that to 28 is pretty useful. And even that Acid Spray going up to 22 inches isn't too bad either. Now also with that you get an extra -1 AP at half range, which yeah, that can be useful. Not really needed for the Rupture Cannon, but the other 2 weapons, yeah, definitely are needed. Then the final one I want to mention here is the Leviathan Hive Fleet. This gives you a free reroll, doesn't it? A free reroll to hit, and it's maybe going to be useful for the Rupture Cannon in particular because you've only got 3 shots. You don't want to be missing those shots, you don't want to be spending command points to reroll those shots, so the Leviathan Hive Fleet may be the one. Okay, so that's some of the Hive Fleets mentioned. Let's go on to the pros and cons before we get into our Planet 40k review for the Tyrannofex. So, pros: 17 wounds, can't go wrong with 17 wounds, toughness 8, even better. There's not much that's going to be wounded on a 3+, so they're going to have to throw all their best weapons at the Tyrannofex just to deal with it. 2+ armor save, so even if it's got high AP, maybe a -3 AP or something, it's still going to give it a 5+ armor save as a regular armor save. It's got a lot of weapon choices, so it's very flexible. Now obviously you've got to pre-pick your weapon, so you can't change it within the game, but pre-game you're going to know what you're going to do with it. Next pro is there's no blast restrictions like an Exocrine. If an Exocrine gets tagged in combat, it simply cannot fire its ranged weapon because of the blast keyword. So I actually think the blast keywords are negative rather than a positive. There's not that many hordes that are going off at the moment. I'd rather be able to fire into combat if I have to. Next, you've got the option of the adaptive physiologies because it's a monster unit, and finally it's a monster unit, so it can fire into combat as we've kind of already alluded to. Now as for the cons for this unit, well, it's got degrading stat line. You've got to mention that as a con, even though it's kind of obvious. It's a large model with 17 wounds. Also, if it's tied up, it's forced to fire at the potentially wrong target. Again, that fall back and shoot option is pretty good here, but if you don't have that, then you will have to fire into combat, and it could be very wasteful, especially if you've got that Rupture Cannon. And finally, it's not going to be that easy to hide. This monster's quite large, so unless it's behind obscuring terrain, you're going to struggle to hide it. But yeah, this is Tyranids, right? It's quite difficult to hide our big monsters. So I think this is one of our best heavy support options that we've got, if not the best heavy option. And it could be a real thorn in the butt for your opponent, especially if they don't know who you're going up, or they don't know who they are going up against. Maybe it's a tournament setting and you're going up blind. They don't know they're going up against Tyranids, and you bring out one of these things, yeah, they're going to have some fun dealing with it. Now that also makes a problem for you because it's going to be luck based on what weapon is going to work more effectively against your opponent's army. For example, going up against hordes, the Rupture Cannon is going to be absolutely useless, isn't it? With only 3 shots and a lot of damage to individual models that have only got 1 wound. But reverse that, the Flesh Borer Hive isn't going to be very useful going up against armor. Well, against heavy armor, vehicles, monsters, that kind of thing. Now the Acid Spray I think is a very good middle ground, especially if you're going into a blind game. Now it does suffer from the range slightly, but it's quite useful against Space Marines in particular because of that damage too, and there's quite a lot of Space Marine factions that you're going to come up against. Now if you are still worried about that range, you could optionally stick this thing into Strategic Reserves, which are now free with the new Arcs of Omen chapter approved book. You can pop this thing out in turn 2, and maybe it's going to be within range if you can get it out and within 18 inches. Otherwise, you're going to have to move him up the battlefield or just wait until something comes near it. But overall, a very super tanky model with toughness 8, 17 wounds. Going to be really hard to shift, especially in incursion missions or incursion game level, because only 1,000 points, your opponent is likely not going to have that much to deal with it. But even in Strike Force 2, it's going to be quite hard to shift unless they focus fire on it. I think the one thing it does lack is an invuln save, but you do have the option of the Dermic Symbiosis, which will give him that 4+ invuln. So for the Planet 40k rating today for the Tyrannofex, I'm going to be going with a Planet 40k rating of 4 stars.